So Melissa, I wonder, would you like to say a prayer to sort of start us out before I introduce you?
Right.
Thank you.
So let's pray together. God, we need you now more than we have perhaps in a very long time. We need your comfort. We need your stability. We need your assurance. We need your love, and we need you to give us the love that you want us to share to others. Help us to realize your presence in powerful ways so that we can be present to others in powerful ways. Be with us tonight as we talk about our hopes about reopening and being together again as a congregation in our lovely sanctuary, and lead us in this time together. Hear our prayers and hear our concerns that we don't voice, but that we each carry within our hearts. Amen.
Thanks, Melissa. So for those of you who are joining us, so it looks like we have some folks who are joining now. It looks like the chat feature is working as well. I apologize for that. We were having some technical issues getting started, and so we got started a little bit late. So I would like to say that we asked the Education Committee for sort of an in-focus, asked the Reopening Task Force to give a report. And we're going to do this the first Wednesday of every month. And so they're going to give some periodic reports. And that is in addition to the great updates that you've been giving us in the Mosaic and on the website already. So thank you for that. And so in a moment, I'll go ahead and turn this over to Jamie and to Melissa, who are co-chairing this task force, the Reopening Task Force. And they're going to start out with a presentation, which should answer a lot of questions, but we also want to encourage those of you who are watching to go ahead and use that live chat feature in the YouTube live stream to ask any questions. And I'll jump in when the presentation is over and go ahead and read some of those questions to you for you to answer. And so with that, I will hand it off to you.
Thank you very much. Most of you know me or would know me. I'm Jamie Luckett. Have been a member at Loyal Lane for about 31 years, something along those lines. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to present this to you and to talk with you about the task force that Melissa and I are co-chairing.
So most of you know me. I've been there forever, right? I mean, you ordained me, and so I'm glad to be here and be of service to our congregation. What Jamie didn't tell you, is that he's also very, very medical, very, very science. He is a old trauma nurse in the ER. He did burn unit. He's done a lot of things, and he's doing occupational health now for the last 20 years or so. And so he's very aware of the CDC and all of the regulators in our government. He's also a nurse practitioner, and he's also a doctor of nursing practice. He doesn't say that very much, but I'm going to. So he's going to give the presentation tonight that he put together and gave to the deacons meeting right about the time that the task force got started. So that's what I've got to say so far.
So for those of you that may not know, I do run a clinic within Lockheed Martin is the business unit. I work for Premise Health, and we have been very, very engaged in trying to maintain the employees there. And so that's what's gotten me started with watching on the process of COVID-19 as it's marched through our community, and has given me some insight into how best to help the church to reopen. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and go into the presentation. I'm going to share the presentation, and Tim, you're going to have to enable the screen share, or let me present one of the two.
You got it. Let's try that and see if that'll help.
Okay.
Is that working for you?
Good. I'm going to try to put PowerPoint into a presentation mode. Tim, if you would just let us know if you don't if anything seems to go awry in some way or another.
Sure thing.
Let's see. Yeah, it's Control F5. But can you, Tim, can you read what's on the screen here in the presentation? How does that look?
Yep, I'm able to see, and I'm also monitoring the live stream. It looks like we can see the presentation. Looks like it's not full screen, but we can see the slides.
All right, let me see if I can enlarge it a bit without trying to go into the system. There we go. So let's go ahead and go from there. So we have been in conversation with trying to help the church to be prepared to open, to know when to open the church, when's our best opportunity to do so. And to that end, the task force has begun to meet. It's been a, let's see. So wanted to talk first a little bit about the science behind COVID-19, or the SARS-CoV-2 that leads to the illness of COVID-19. The virus is actually called SARS-CoV-2, but the illness is COVID-19. As you all may be aware, that we've been seeing a number of deaths throughout the world, where the United States is above 105,000 deaths currently caused by the coronavirus. The coronavirus looks like this. It does have a spike. It's a ball-shaped RNA virus, and it's got a ball. It has a number of connection spikes or points. That's not very relevant right now, but it may be as we find medications that may help and cure, or vaccines to help prevent COVID-19. So how does COVID-19 spread? And we're going to move pretty rapidly through this, because I don't want to just overwhelm people. And I apologize to anyone for all the verbiage. If it's too much, just try to go through, and I'll try to speak to it without reading the slides. But talking about how does COVID-19 spread? Predominantly, it looks like it spreads through droplets, meaning when someone coughs or sneezes. I have a great slide from the CDC in the next slide. This is a picture of someone sneezing. So if you can imagine this being in church, if you can think about sitting in the pews like we normally might, you could see that this could throw a number of droplets as well as aerosols out into the air. And the difference is the size of particles. Sneezes produce droplets, which are fairly large, and they settle relatively quickly, which gives us our 6-foot spread that you all have now heard about being 6 foot away for the physical distancing. However, there also seems to be some carrying of the virus in aerosols. We don't know as much about how much that impacts the spread of the illness, but it's an important marker. The other thing that we wanted to acknowledge is that Melissa and I are really pretty close to a group that's more affected than others. We're getting into our 60s. I'll say out on that. And so our risk factors go up just by virtue of our age, as do many of the people in our congregation. For people that are younger, they may get a milder version of the illness, though certainly not all get a milder version of the illness, but they're at a lower risk, and so of death, of fatality. They have a milder illness, but that's part of the way that this is spread. So one of the things that we're looking at is, and the question that we often get is, when are we planning to open? What's our date of opening? Tell us when we're going to do that. And we wanted to just point out that we are watching carefully the numbers and the science behind the data that's collected. And I want to speak to that in just a moment. First off, I want to say that we will continue to offer an online streaming process, or if not streaming, a YouTube process for people that may choose to continue to worship in their homes. They may feel more comfortable, or it might be easier to take care of the children if they're small. There are lots of factors that come to play there. There may be some folks that will have a chronic illness, and we now learn that we can really participate fairly well, even in an online state or in a streaming mode, so that we can communicate through the chat streams, and we can support each other and still be family and still be church for each other. We are talking about opening in phases, And we're not opening by age groups, we're opening by building, because the geographic space, the square footage that we have open makes a difference in how we are able to help people to be distant. It also helps to clean and make sure the facility is as good a shape as it possibly can be through all of that process. And so our initial step is to open the sanctuary building. We are looking into the August timeframe as far as how that goes, and that's going to be dependent on one statistic, the number of new cases in Dallas, Ellis, Collin, and Denton counties. And that's the statistic that I'm looking at more than any. That statistic is borne out by the new cases per day rate. The new cases per day rate is a trailing indicator. It tells us what was going on 3 weeks before when someone may have been exposed. If I'm exposed today, and today is June the 3rd, if I'm exposed today to coronavirus, then I probably won't develop symptoms for a period of days. That time frame seems to be something like 5 to 14 days. So if I get exposed and I begin to show symptoms, then I'm going to take myself and perhaps go to the urgent care or wherever to be seen by my nurse practitioner or physicians or whoever, and get tested or attempt to be tested. Once I'm tested, it may take up to 5 to 7 days to get the results back for that test, depending on which day you get tested, whether there's a weekend involved. There are several different how and where you go to get tested. But that all adds up to a 21-day trailing indicator. So if I were exposed to, if I were looking at statistics for today, I'm really looking at what happened back in May, something like May the 13th or something along those lines in terms of the exposure. And that's how we have to think ahead as we're beginning to look at how this goes. And in terms of epidemiology, we like to see a number of cycles of reducing new cases before we began to talk about bringing ourselves and our families together to meet. And one of the ways that I wanted to show you that was the item that I'm currently using, and I apologize for that. Tim, can you see the Texas COVID-19 trends?
Not currently.
I may have to change my share. Just a second. Yeah. Okay.
There it is.
So if we look at COVID-19, I'm going to try to okay. So if we look at COVID-19 and we look at Dallas County specifically, if I scroll over here to this day and time frame, you can see that the lowest number of cases was on around, and that's a statistical fluke, was on around the 24th of May. Well, the 24th of May is representative of what was going on actually on May the 10th. And so we can march back and we can say, what was happening May the 10th? Well, the state opened up on May 1, but people were still pretty cautious about going out, and they were much more careful about wearing masks and not having physical contact. Well, humans are very much a contact-based tribe of people. We're a group that like to hug each other and to shake hands and all of those things. And so we've seen some relaxation of those behaviors since that time. And so if we scroll over, one day to the right or left, you can see that on the 25th, there was 178, and you can see the slope of climb now as we march through the month, so that on the 30th, when it reflected May 16th, 3 weeks back, so it would have been May 7th, I guess, would have been, or something there about 3 weeks prior to that, is now reflected into this number of new cases. And you can see that the new cases are beginning to climb, and they continue to do so, with the last date of today being the largest climb in some time. And watching this pretty carefully, I believe this is a real statistic. If you'll note that the peak of time when we had cases back in May, which really reflects April, 3 weeks ago from May the 11th, whatever that works out to be, you can see that we were very close. We actually have a higher number in Dallas County today than we did at that time at what was, at least in some people's minds, the peak of the COVID-19 infection rate. So this is where I'm looking for this, and I can release that web page. I look at this almost daily. It does come out of the Department of Health and Human Services, out of Texas.gov. So I think that it is a reliable metric, one that I find to be useful and functional in trying to get a handle on where we are. If we look at that time frame, when we look at the growth, if that continues and we can create a trend line, you'll see that we will be back again into a fairly severe pandemic in Dallas County relatively soon. That doesn't look exactly that same way in Ellis County. It doesn't look that way in Denton County, but certainly in Dallas County, it looks this way. And unfortunately, with the events that have been happening this last week, I don't see that. Well, we'll watch and see what that trend does, but I am concerned that that trend will continue up for a little while. Okay, let's see if I can get unshared again. So that's where we derive the dates. So looking at 3 cycles of 3 weeks, so approximately 9 weeks to know whether that statistic is really reflecting a true trend or a minor blip. And that's why we've set our dates where we are. And the question, a very valid one, comes up is, why is that way? Why are we looking at that way? And I think we can talk about that using the National Geographic information. You'll see up here at the top where places like Philadelphia, this was reflecting in the 1918 pandemic or influenza, the H1N1 influenza. And you can note that in Philadelphia, there was a very large spike after they began opening up. Notably in Philadelphia, there was a parade to sell World War I war bonds, where 200,000 people came out, and within just a very short period of time, they were having 748 deaths a day, one of the largest death rates of any city in the US during the last major pandemic. So as compared to that, to other cities that did a better job of locking down or having people not congregate, not allowing schools and churches to open, cities like Columbus, Ohio and Chicago, Illinois, that had a much lower rate of infection during that time frame. And that's what we're trying to recreate, is to try to reduce the possibility of a really quick return to the very high levels of cases, pandemic cases in the Dallas metroplex. I want to introduce the people that are on this task force. I want to say that this is a incredible group of forward-thinking people that have experience with dealing with crowds, with groups, medical experience in their background, but also, and I think probably more importantly, this marvelous experience of being in the church, a cross-section of the church population, of who we are and how we're represented within the population. This is not something that we're going alone. It's certainly not something that we're not doing without absolute consultation with the deacon body and with many others within church and our population. I am, of course, Pastor Greg. Okay. So a couple of interesting things. I told a story for the Mosaic about, this is a real story of somebody that we provide the screening at my office, who called and basically said he had gone to a large birthday party the weekend prior. He had a mask in his pocket. His wife and children were there. And when he got to this party, nobody was wearing masks, so he didn't feel uncomfortable not wearing his mask. So they felt like, oh, we're all family and we're all well. Nobody was sick on the day that they went to the party. He hugs his cousins and he holds their babies and all the things that we would normally do at any kind of family gathering, because we're humans and we require touch. We need that touch. In fact, children and babies are harmed by not having that kind of touch. But then he called on during the week to say that his cousin had gotten sick after the party and continued to become ill and later tested positive for COVID-19. So now there's a group of 25 or 30 individuals, all from the same family, that are at a higher risk. And we know that Royal Lane is much the same way. We want to be in contact with each other. We love to shake hands and to hug and to, all those things that we do. And so as a congregation, we felt the task force felt like that it was incredibly important to not put ourselves at risk, to fail to that human need for touch, and to then create a circumstance where a large number of people at Royal Lane became ill. And so that's kind of where we were with that. Now, within your family bubble, grant you, if you have children and your husbands and wives and grandparents, where everyone has said, okay, we're going to watch out for each other, we're going to be in our family bubble, and then you can all sit together. Our goal is to try to reduce that family viral bubble to one family, right? And not make it everybody else. And so it's not that we're going to separate each individual person 6 foot apart, parents and children and all that, but no, you can all sit in your row and still be a family. Whereas, our goal though is to limit the groups and then the exposure of that group to 6 feet apart. And that'll take some work. That's going to take some arrangement as we work through all of the way the congregation and the pews sit. And we are absolutely working very hard to try to come up with a plan to make that functional and workable and still pleasurable and to meet the needs of the people that are in the congregation. I want to credit Terry Barrier and Kathy Webb for some stellar work in trying to figure out how to do that. What does that separation look like? What does that grid look like? And then we are all working hard to come up with good ideas as far as how to reduce those exposures. So this is the grid that that I was talking about with Terry. We are talking about an initial occupancy of 25%, which works out to be 82 people. And our plan is to have a registration system to go and register and say, hey, I'm definitely coming on Sunday, and to see, are there already 82 people signed up to come into the sanctuary. That 82 number is based on our occupancy rating as a church. And so, or 25% of the occupancy of our church. And so that'll be a pretty firm stop for us once we get to that place. All participants will be required to wear a mask. With a mask, particularly a cloth covering, not a respirator like I would wear at work, but a cloth covering, you are wearing that as your good deed to the other parishioners in Royal Lane. You are wearing that mask so that you could prevent, it will go up quickly, we'll see, yeah, that from happening from you. Sometimes we all cough, we all sneeze, when we are challenged, even if we are speaking loudly enough to be understood, all that can happen. And so we would wear a mask to protect our neighbors, to protect the people that are sitting in the pew near us, to not make it so forceful. And I pray, and I would ask that everyone else wear a mask to help protect me, so that when I'm breathing, I'm not breathing excess quantity of those particles out of the air. Now I know the recommendations have switched back and forth around masks, I expect there'll be ongoing changes in those recommendations, but I can hardly see a space where in a public gathering that masks wouldn't be helpful to reduce the incidence of illness, not only COVID-19, but the coming flu season, which is rapidly approaching. So wearing a mask, we do have people already working on providing community masks. If somebody comes in and says, I have one, or I haven't got one, or I'm able to buy one, we do have people that will be producing those masks so that we can give you a mask or give the parishioner a mask and say, please wear the mask throughout the church service. We're not going to ask for those back. We're not going to launder them. That's going to be our gift to you, and our hope that you will continue to join us in the service. We are also working on a plan to, for those who decline to wear a mask, and about how to help them understand the importance of this factor for us. Facility preparation. We are working on having a firm plan for additional cleaning, about what to do with the bathrooms and all of those items. That brochures and hymnals have been removed.
Some of these have changed since this
True.
slide was made. So some of them haven't. Some of them have already been taken care of.
Right.
We started out with this.
Exactly. But just know that we are going to put extra efforts into making sure that the facility is well prepared for your arrival and then well taken care of afterwards. We're going to try to keep normal CDC practices, the current recommendations: distancing, masks, cleaning your hands, using a hand sanitizer. There'll be people available to provide sanitizers. There'll be masks that will be available. We're going to ask you to worship inside and socialize outside, where the ventilation is better. We all want to talk, and that's cool, but let's go out into the area between Family Hall and the sanctuary to talk, or on the lawn, or in the parking lot, as
Anywhere.
we do sometimes.
Anywhere where it's
outside.
sun shining.
Right. Sunday school is not going to be open at first, so we're asking everybody to park in the parking lot that borders Royal Lane and Hillcrest Lane, in that parking area, because the doorways will be limited to two. One, the handicap door that's on the east side of the sanctuary, and then the main sanctuary doorway. The west entrance from the arcade won't be open. There'll be some work around communion, about how we do that. If we do that, we're still having some questions about that. We're going to ask that the congregation sit in designated spaces or where they're seated, if we have ushers showing people where their seats. We're going to have a mechanism for reserving your seat in the congregation, so that when we hit that count of 82, we're not over or above the recommendations for the city.
I just want to clarify, it's not reserving your specific seat somewhere that you want to sit.
Right.
But rather you have a place in that 82, or that I have a place in that 82. I may not sit where I usually sit, but I'll have a seat when I register.
Thank you. And
We're Baptist.
We are. That's true. We always also ask anyone, if you think you're getting sick, or if you are sick, or if you're running a fever, or have any kind of serious or ailment, we will ask you to stay home. And if you have a serious underlying condition, heart disease, lung disease, something that puts you at an extra risk, because let me be clear, even coming together as a group as we're describing doesn't make it zero risk. We want to make it a small risk, but we can't get to zero. So you can help by, if you are at extra risk, to not come in. We're going to have the children and youth, all that can, come to the sanctuary service. Sit with your families, enjoy your company, have crayons and colors and things for the little kids to play with, and we'll all be together for that service. We just didn't have a way for childcare to care for very young children in a way that was safe for the daycare workers or the other children. we ask that people that are not in the family bubble to be discouraged, right? So if your kids are, they're already sister and brother, that's fine. But getting all the youth together, that's probably not going to work. It takes the risk of spreading the virus. We'll have changing stations in the foyer bathroom, and we're still working through the best way to make that happen. You can see the suggestions there, and we've kind of come to different ideas based on one of the parents that's in our task force with young children. Music and worship will be a challenge. It may be that it may be more presentational with singers, much like you're seeing on the YouTube presentations, as opposed to group, because rapid singing or forceful enunciation of words through song actually does produce more aerosols than we would like to see. And wearing masks while you're singing will be challenging. The choir is working to produce Zoom choir performances, which should be fun. And then finally, we also are working on plans for contact tracing. What happens, not if, friends, when someone comes to church and then in a few days calls in and says, I've been tested positive for COVID-19. So we're working on ways to identify where people were in the congregation, where that one person may have sat, who were the nearest people in proximity to them, and then how to contact you in that process. And we are hoping to incorporate that in our registration process. So we'll have a cell phone or a number that we could rapidly call people that may have had contact to let them know and to be vigilant and to be aware. And I know I'm a little bit over. I think we ran a bit over due to the just getting started, but I wonder if there were any questions in the chat. Tim, I wasn't watching that.
Yeah, so I'm not seeing anything right at the moment, but I want to go ahead and invite folks, and we are on a little bit of a delay. So what you and I are seeing here on the Zoom call is delayed by maybe 10 or 12 seconds on YouTube. And so just I want to invite people, go ahead and submit any questions that you have after this really great presentation into the chat, and I'll go ahead and I'll read those off to Melissa and to Jamie. But I also want to just say thank you so much for this work. This is so thorough and I think really incredible. And thank you for sharing your expertise on this. The two of you, of course, but your entire task force, I think are doing a fantastic job on this. And this presentation, I think, is really helpful. So I'm not seeing any questions just yet. I mean, let me ask one question I had. I guess let me direct it to Jamie because you have more of the medical experience. I noticed on one of the images that you showed from the 1918 pandemic, those double humps, that kind of second curve peak, if you will. And I wanted, I think we've all been hearing a little bit about that. Is that, I mean, it looks like maybe that's what's happening as well as we're looking at the real-time information from Dallas County right now. But is that, is that pretty common? Is that something that is expected?
It's absolutely common in a pandemic, and it's an unfortunate side effect. You can see in a number of these images, and this image is available. It's out there on National Geographic website. There are a couple of places where you can find this, so you can get, it's less of an eye chart for people. But yeah, that's the important thing is to diminish first the speed and the rapidity of the caseload so that the medical community doesn't get overwhelmed. But then secondly, to not end up with a double impact of having to once again have to shut down the city or the facility and to prohibit the gathering of people and individuals. And while we certainly are trying to do that, it is unfortunate that I think that we are beginning to see that double hump already happening with the daily case rate. And I am concerned with, like I say, the events over the last several nights that may get worse. So that is in fact what we're trying to do. And even if this happens with the city, I don't want Royal Lane to be a contributor to this rapid increase of a second hump or a second response to the infection if we can prevent it.
Yeah, of course. I have a question. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I want to just also remind everybody that, yes, we're going to continue during the entire time. We're going to have, as we're being closed and then reopening, we're not completely closed in that
Right,
there
we're
are
not.
small groups that are meeting via Zoom. And I know that's dissatisfying in some ways. And yet it's better than crickets, not hearing from people at all. So all of the Sunday school classes that are online, that are on Zoom, those are going to keep going that way. This is only for worship so far. This is just worship in the sanctuary. So I trust that as we become more proficient with our electronics and our Zoom, that there will be fewer glitches and less disruptive sort of stuff that can happen with anybody's stuff.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Good, and thank you for the plug there for Sunday school classes and other groups that are meeting, which are all listed on the website at royallane.org. Just to finish that plug, but there are a number of groups that are meeting, including not just Sunday school classes, but also I know the choir meets pretty regularly for Zoom calls. And the youth and children have met several times, and there are others. And of course, anybody who is watching, who is interested, who thinks a certain group is missing, start a group. Let us know, reach out to us. We can have as many groups meeting virtually as we want. And so if there's a need for something, please let us know. I do have a question from Jennifer Maddox. She asks, how will reservations be made? Will they be online, by phone, or by other means?
We've identified a couple of different ways, and Tim, you might be able to talk more, but the original way with that Kathy Webb and Terry Barrier worked through, and I want to give credit to Kathy Webb for her stunning work on this, was through the Google, and I may not have it right in terms of, but there's a mechanism for Google Meeting or Google registration that allows us to ask the questions about illness and whether or not you have any health concerns, and then a way to get in contact with you. Tim, you had mentioned there may be some other options that we didn't consider yet, and I don't want to out the task force, but
we are scheduled to meet tomorrow. We meet weekly on Thursdays from 7 to 8:30. So that's on the agenda for tomorrow.
And just to be clear, we're meeting on Zoom, by the way.
Yeah, we don't see each other except on the computer screen.
I'm getting both Terry and Kathy are chiming in that it's going to be looks like it's probably going to be a Google form, but whatever sort of system we use, it will certainly be, there will certainly be links available on the website. And I know that we're going to work on featuring those prominently. And so there will be an online option. I mean, Jennifer was also curious if there were other ways, maybe for those who may not be comfortable using a website or going online to register, if you had thought about that at all.
That's an excellent point, and we had not discussed a different way of doing so. The staffing in the office is reduced, and so having somebody readily available by phone might be a challenge. But thank you for that input, and we will consider ways and begin to talk about ways that perhaps we can meet that need.
The concern, or one of the advantages of the online, is that it has the capacity to stop registration at the number that we can't go over. So if I'm number 83 and I try to register, I won't be able to register because the capacity's been reached. So that was one of the things that made the digital kind of thing, the computer registration, attractive.
We were also looking for a platform that was both could be accessed by any device, phone, whatever, to make it simpler to do.
Related to that, I know Rebecca had also asked, I think the question she's asking is, for registration, will you be able to make registrations by family, or would, so does I think what she's asking is, does every individual need to be registered separately, or can that be just a family registration because you're allowing family units essentially to sit together?
We just need to have the count.
The number.
And I don't recall looking at the form in any detail, but that would be one of the things is that you or anyone on this reservation, so multiple people can be on one reservation. It's about the number of people to not go over our capacity.
Yeah, no, thank you for that.
Thank you. That's good as well.
Yeah. I'm not seeing other questions at the moment. I did say Terry Barrier did chime in here in the chat, which I know everybody can read, but I just want to say if a single person registers, they will sit where two places are set. And so I think, I don't know if you mentioned this specifically, but I do believe my understanding from a previous presentation that you gave was you will designate certain seats on pews by orders of worship, by laying those in a spot, and folks will only sit where those are located. Is that correct?
That's our intent. Yes.
The layout is that there'll be a pew that is empty. There'll be one where there'll be people spaced out. The one behind them will be empty, so that there is that 6-foot radius.
Great. Yes. There are no more questions here in the chat. It seems to have gone a bit quiet. So let me say again, thank you so much to the two of you and to your whole task force for all this work that you're doing, and for this presentation, which was also very thorough and I think really informative, and I got a lot out of it, and I hope everybody watching did as well. So thank you both so much.
Thank you for your time and for
inviting us.
Yeah, and excusing us for going over.
So I want to say, we members of the task force, and I don't know if you want to quickly mention sort of if you know what the schedule is, but I know various members of your task force are going to be joining us. This is going to be a fairly regular thing on the first Wednesday evening of every month. So the first Wednesday of wow, what month are we in now? June, I guess. So July will be the next one, and we will have another one, I believe, in August.
Yes, we're scheduled for June, July, and August. July 1st, Terry Barrier, Kathy Webb, and Harry Hunter will be presenting. And on August 5th, it'll be Alan Greider, Betty Meacham, and Sandy Washington.
Great. And so, please join us for those regular updates, because, as both Jamie and Melissa were saying, things change, and they can change pretty quickly. And so as the reality here kind of on the ground changes, and cases, increase or decrease, there may be some changes in the timeline or in some procedures, I imagine. And so those regular updates, I think, will be really, really helpful. And so please plan on being with us again the first Wednesday of the next couple of months. And then I also just want to give a quick plug, because I'm sure Jennifer would want me to say this. We also have a couple of In Focus events scheduled around COVID and how folks are dealing with that. And so we will have a panel discussion in 2 weeks on Wednesday evening. So please join us for that as well. And that information will be on the website.
Tim,
so thank you. Yes.
Can I mention one more thing? The task force is working on some sort of informational public service announcements that will be very short to go on the web page, and those will be available for people to go back and to watch and to answer their questions or give them more questions to call somebody about.
Yes. Thank you. So thank you all for joining us, and we're going to go ahead and sign off. So please join us again in a couple of weeks, and join us again at the beginning of next month for our next update. So everybody, God bless.
Be safe.
Have a good night. Be safe.